Hello. Good evening, everyone. Hi. Good evening, everyone. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to offer you a very warm welcome to Bloomberg. Welcome to our European headquarters, and I'm Elizabeth Drummond, Director for Government and Public Affairs here at Bloomberg. We are very pleased to be having you tonight. Our company is a very firm believer in the importance of facilitating important dialogues such as tonight's on important public policy issues that face London, the UK, and the world. So we're very privileged to be hosting you tonight for the Center for Social Justice Founders Lecture with our special guest, the Right Honorable Ian Duncan Smith, MP. And we're commemorating the UN World Day of Social Justice. I hope you have a very enjoyable evening, and I would like to go ahead and turn the program over to Philippa Stroud, Executive Director of the Center for Social Justice. Philippa, welcome.
Thank you so much, and welcome to tonight's inaugural Center for Social Justice Founders Lecture. Tonight, we are celebrating the United Nations UN World Day of Social Justice. The World Summit for Social Development was held in Denmark in 1995 and resulted in the Copenhagen Declaration and Programme of Action. At this summit, more than 100 political leaders pledged to make the conquest of poverty and full employment, as well as stable and just societies, their overriding objectives. They also agreed on the need to put people at the centre of development plans. It's just a bit worrying it took till 1995 for them to do that. We could not think, though, of a better way of celebrating World Day of Social Justice than by creating the CSJ's Founders Lecture, celebrating the founding of the Centre for Social Justice 11 years ago. The Founders Lecture will provide our founder, Ian Duncan Smith, with a platform to share his experiences and insights into combating poverty. It has been through his thought leadership and his reforms at the Department for Work and Pension that have supported 670,000 workless households back into work in the last 5 years. By making this lecture annual, we are hoping to document the changes and challenges to fighting UK poverty over the next 10 years and provide a historic benchmark of poverty fighting in the UK. But before we get into that, I want to take the opportunity to thank Bloomberg for hosting us. We literally rang you up and asked, and you said yes. We are really grateful. Thank you for... Thank you for your hospitality, your commitment to excellence, and your generous welcome. We're thrilled, too, that we have been joined by all of you. The CSJ is literally like a family. Many of us have journeyed, many of you have journeyed with us over literally the last 11 years. And it's special for us to see so many of you in this audience that we know so well. I'm actually just eyeballing my son, who's journeyed with me for a few more than 11 years. Thank you for being so faithful to the Centre for Social Justice and all that we are trying to build. Thank you to for those of you who are new faces. You are so welcome. We want tonight to be a window into the work and vision of the CSJ, who we are and what we're actually trying to achieve. If we have done that by the end of this evening, we will have succeeded. But tonight is an evening celebrating the founding of the CSJ. So I want to turn your minds back 11 years ago. There were some photographs that have been kind of on a loop, slightly terrifying ones of me from time to time. But turn your minds back 11 years ago to the birth of the Centre for Social Justice. There were 4 of us sitting in a really grotty office in Lambeth North, Hawkstone Hall, had a great history, but the room really didn't match the history. So Hawkstone Hall was the site of the birth of the Ragged School movement under Shaftesbury and the anti-slavery movement under William Wilberforce. And it was marked with the Lincoln Tower, a gift from Lincoln's family. 2 members of this team, this 4-man team, were from the voluntary sector, myself and Tom Jackson, who is here tonight, and 2 from the world of politics, Tim Montgomery and Cameron Watt, who is also here tonight. This political and voluntary sector combination has been a hallmark of all that the CSJ does. We start with the premise that every problem is being solved by someone, somewhere. And it's our job at the Centre for Social Justice to go and find it, bottle it, and bring it back to Westminster to inform policy making and to inform policy proposals that are effective, scalable, and evidence-based in order to solve Britain's most intractable social problems. Unfortunately, Tim Montgomery cannot be with us tonight, as the Times has him covering the US election. And he was last seen coming up for air somewhere around South Carolina. We miss him enormously, but know that the Times reporting of the US elections is in safe hands. But we do have Cameron and Tom with us, and so I would like you to welcome them as I'm going to interview them about the first few days of the Centre for Social Justice. So we'd like to come to the stage. Welcome, Cameron and Tom. This is a great sense of power. Normally, I'm the other side of one of these interviews, so it's very nice to actually be on this side. So, very quickly, one abiding memory of that grotty office in about 2 words. Tom?
You getting your first brief from the DWP, Philippa.
Really?
Yes.
Was it terrifying?
And trying to understand the statistics and the jargon, and I always knew you'd be a special advisor there.
Oh, I genuinely hadn't prepped him for this. And Cameron?
I think just a real sense of early promise and excitement that we were setting off on this course. We didn't know where we'd end up.
We didn't know where we were going.
You know, whether it would succeed. And I think, you know, having not been involved for too much of the last 10 years, people have taken it on and done great things. But it was just that real sense of early promise and excitement.
Yeah, in a grotty office. What were you doing, Tom, before the CSJ was founded, and how did that lead you to becoming part of the founding of the CSJ?
Yeah, after experience in South Africa and seeing what I describe as civil society at work in South Africa in the post-Mandela years, I was involved through the church in social enterprise in West London, setting up things like a debt advice centre for people in debt, and particularly a programme working with unemployed young people between the ages of 16 and 24 and helping them into work, which continues to flourish.
Fantastic. So Tom and I, the two from the voluntary sector background. And Cameron, what were you up to before you came to the CSJ?
Much less worthy. I was a political hack at Conservative Central Office. And I'd been recruited to work with Tim Montgomery and the Renewing One Nation Social Policy Unit. And we were trying to build links with a wide range of poverty-fighting groups across the UK, tackling, you know, the 5 pathways to poverty. And we built those relationships, and we were supporting Ian, Oliver Letwin, David Willits, the Shadow Cabinet, to try and develop a distinct and sort of values-based approach to tackling poverty. So writing speeches, briefings, visits. And Tim and I also did Ian's famous visits to Gallowgate and Easter House in Glasgow. And I can tell you as a Scot, for a Tory leader to put himself out there and immerse himself in Easter House was a pretty bold thing to do. And I think it was great that he did it.
So Tom, how has the CSJ influenced what you've gone on to do?
Yeah, I think the CSJ for me was about the importance of social innovation coming out of the communities. You've touched on that. And I think it reinforced my belief in that, and also the need to scale that, to improve the excellence of the programs themselves and the enabling environment around it. And I think that remains a top priority for me. So practically, the work with unemployed young people through SPEAR, we're now in 8 centres across London. We pay a lot of attention to our impact measurement. I think we're helping to lead the way on that. And I think the other thing I'd say, is, which I learned through the CSJ, was the fact that as much as the financial side of poverty is immensely important, there are all these associated factors which are enmeshed with it, and paying attention to the human side of the conditions people struggle with is just immensely important if you want to see people flourish.
Thank you. And Cameron, if you had a favourite memory of the CSJ in those early days, what would it be?
Can I be greedy and have two? You'll have seen earlier there were pictures of Ian and Betsy opening the Tabernacle Christian School in North Kensington. This grew out of a very small black majority church that were concerned about how their kids were, I think, suffering from malign influences in local schools. They were suffering from educational failure. And they just said they were going to do something about it. And so they set up a really small independent school, charging very low fees. And they were running that school out of a whole range of church halls and just a whole range of premises. They didn't have a fixed place where they could grow the work. So Ian and I remember, were mercilessly pestering Merrick Cockell and his colleagues at the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea to encourage that council to really back this fantastic local initiative. And to be fair to them, they did. They helped find them a premises. And we had a great and joyous launch. And for me, that was demonstrating how small people, just ordinary people with strong values and the determination can do great things in tackling poverty. The other memory was about 10 years ago at the CSJ Awards, where we had, unannounced, we had the arrival on stage of this troupe of young South African kids, some of them orphaned through AIDS, who did this incredible Zulu dance, which was amazing, just captivating, electrifying, stole the show, and I'll never forget that.
And Tom's just said, me too, I want to do a favourite memory, so over to you, Tom.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I remember, it's just funny being here for this founding event, but I remember the very first event we ever did, if you both remember it, in Hawkstone Hall, and I think we both spoke at it. But there was, William Hague spoke at it, and it lighted on the issue of human trafficking, which was never an issue that I'd ever heard discussed in the UK at that point. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of that the CSJ has done is to drive that agenda of the modern slavery agenda through. It's just fantastic. Mm.
Yeah, no, and we're actually going to do some more work on it as well to take it forward. And if you had to sum up the CSJ in 3 words, Tom, what would it be? This is me being very disciplined with them. 3 words.
I'd say not very attractive, but multiplying what
not
works.
Very attractive.
No.
Not very attractive. 3 words.
That's,
Tom.
no, those are the words. Multiplying what works is what I'd say, yeah.
Cameron?
Summing up the CSJ in 3 words, I would say the CSJ is bold, I would say the CSJ is principled, and I would say that the CSJ is still very much needed.
Well, I couldn't have put it better myself, so thank you so much for joining us. So the next person that I want to introduce tonight is Mark Florman. Mark is the chairman of the Centre for Social Justice, and he too is one of the founding members of the centre. And you have seen his photographs going round and round on the loop as well over the whole of the last 11 years of the CSJ's history. He and Alexia have opened their home on more occasions than I can count for CSJ events, and I thank you. He stood up and took over as chairman when Ian and I went into government without a moment's notice, and we are really grateful. And he has written and argued for the world's poorest in every political and business setting that I know. So please welcome Mark Florman, the chairman of the Centre for Social Justice, who will introduce Ian Duncan-Smith.
Well, thank you, Philippa, for that incredibly kind introduction. My lords, ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure it is to be speaking at the inaugural CSJ Founders Lecture, taken 11 years to get here. As Philippa said, I'm Mark Florman, and I've been the chairman of the CSJ for the past 6 years. So it is my absolute honour to be introducing our keynote speaker tonight, the Right Honourable Ian Duncan-Smith. Now, Ian is no ordinary politician. He has been a serving MP since 1992. His previous political roles include Shadow Secretary of State for Social Security, Shadow Defence Secretary, and leader of the Conservative Party. And of course, he is currently the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, and he has been since 2010. Somewhere amongst all of that hard work, he found time to set up the Centre for Social Justice. I think you'll agree with me that, despite being the self-described quiet man, Ian is certainly effective, leaving behind him a trail of incredible political achievements. We're honoured to have Ian here tonight to deliver the very first Centre for Social Justice Founders Lecture. Please join me in welcoming Ian to the stage.
Mark, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Mark, you know, when you got up, I thought I'm good for at least 10 minutes now. I can make a few notes on this, and then suddenly Mark's off the platform, and I've now got to speak. So, and the other thing I just wanted to say tonight, where's Christian Guy? Is he? Christian, this speech is wholly about Europe, okay? I want you to... Okay, it's all right. This is not the one I checked past Downing Street, so it's all right. You can tell them it's confirmed their view of me. So, anyway, just in case you thought you were coming for some other purpose. Can I... he is really worried, by the way, just now. So, anyway, can I first of all start by thanking everybody? I want to say a few words about a few people before I do. First of all, I want to start by thanking Mark, because Mark, as Philippa said earlier on, you have been a real stalwart and stepping into the breach. You were also very busy at the time, so... you know, you've seen the CSJ through moves and through good times and sometimes not quite so good times after we departed, and I have a particular thanks to you for having stepped into the breach. It's also great here tonight, Tom. I hadn't realized, funnily enough, when I was coming here that you were here as well, and also Cameron. Where is Cameron? There he is. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong place. Anyway, Cameron, you and Tom, and it's great because I do remember that, Philip, you never told me it was that grotty. I mean, you thought it was... You liked it, you said. That's why I got a smaller room, because you said it was cozier, you know. It's much nicer. Anyway, it's great to see both of you here, because you are really the beginning of the CSJ. I'm sorry that Tim couldn't be here, but I know he's here in spirit. I spoke to him a couple of nights ago, and it was a very tight team. And so I want to thank both of you particularly as well for having been involved in the start of it. And the thanks I cannot do without is to Philippa, because in honest truth, the CSJ wouldn't be here if it weren't for Philippa. I may have been the founder of the CSJ. It's quite a grand title, that, so I'm not quite certain what that really means. But if I was the founder, Philippa, you've been the foundation stone, because we cannot possibly have existed from the beginning all the way through, had you not been part of that and then taken on the responsibility to do the day-to-day running of it and everything else. You know, I'm a politician and I do lots of things, not necessarily always running things is the thing I don't necessarily do, but I do lots of things running around the place. But you were the one that actually sort of sat down and got all the stuff sorted, moved the offices, got all the team organized, focused on what they were doing. This is long before we actually went into government together. And then, of course, you've been absolutely phenomenal in government with me. And as I said to you the other day, there's not a day goes by I don't miss you not being in government. But I know you've gone to an even greater cause, back to the CSJ, and I know they love it. But I want to say, particularly to you and to all the others, I wonder if we can all give them a round of applause, because Philippa, Tom, and Cameron, and well, thank you very much indeed. So it is great to be here this evening to talk to you tonight at this inaugural Founders Lecture. The night, I think, does provide for me, and I hope for all of you, an opportunity just to look back a little bit over the CSJ, some of the successes over the last 11 years, but more importantly, I think, in a sense, try and look forward to where we go from here. I'm often, I think, asked in kind of shorthand, really, by lots of media when I'm meeting them, how the CSJ was created. And there's often different interpretations about how this happens. And I've lots of column inches, I think, have been devoted to the subject, some of which, of course, paint a picture of I mean, the media loves this kind of stuff, the road to Damascus moment for me on the Easterhouse estate in Glasgow. I always think actually even the biggest effect for me was Gallowgate rather than Glasgow, and Cameron, you made a point of that, one of the first people that's actually ever reminded me of that. And it's certainly true that my visit to those locations, as Cameron said, back in that period of 2002, was instrumental in trying to shape one's opinion of how this should actually go. But in truth, my passion really, in a sense, and my belief, in a sense, of bringing social justice as a conservative into the heart of conservative and British politics in general began really much earlier in my political career. I mean, one example, something which not many people will know, and I'm sure you don't have to go searching for this, was I remember when I was made Shadow Secretary of State for Social Security, and I did a bit of travelling around in various locations, talked to a lot of people, visited some various difficult areas, and a concept came into my mind about a problem that every time I was going to different locations, I see them in my constituency as well, there was a problem about what I referred to really as an inverted society. Something was going fundamentally wrong, where we seemed to have so many families in these areas that were dysfunctional, and men were not engaged or involved with enough families. And I made a speech at the time, which I actually titled, because of the program that was on, Men Behaving Badly. And it was really a point about how, in a sense, a number of men who were no longer in the workforce, beyond the workforce, but they weren't doing the other things, and all of the women were going to work, and there was a change in society, and the men were being released to go and do all sorts of things, but not necessarily constructive work, and not being bound into the important social objective of actually bringing up families. And so in the speech, I talked about the welfare system, instead of protecting families, was incentivizing really a process of family breakup, absolving fathers of their parental responsibilities and releasing them to be doing things that were not constructive, and if anything, you can argue were destructive. And going further back, I even had my own personal experience, really, in a sense, of the welfare system early on, and I've had, as I know, 2 periods of unemployment. Betsy, who is sitting here, without whom I couldn't do absolutely anything, remembers endlessly the letters being written off to various people and the terrible brush-offs, that's if they were bothered to reply, and not getting a job. So I know what it's like to be in the queue in a job centre. I know I've spent days doing all of this, and so in a sense I know that what it's like, in a sense, also to be made redundant. And I must say, being made redundant and making people redundant, both of which I've done, the making people redundant was in many senses the worst thing that I have ever had to do in this respect, and I would never want to do it again. But I know that those experiences helped shape my thinking of this. So my own experience is a part of this. And then when the CSJ was founded, conservative politics, I thought, was really at the time, and this was the problem I was trying to resolve, was dominated by 3 issues, really: tax, immigration, and Europe. Did I really write that? Okay, nothing changes in that case, then, I know that. So reading today's newspapers, don't worry, Christian, it's not going there, you may be tempted into thinking that nothing has actually changed. But certainly those issues will always, of course, perennially be with us, because they are big and important issues and they resonate. But something has changed fundamentally, I hope and believe, with my party. And I hope and believe changed profoundly, and there's no going back. Today, I believe the Conservative Party is committed not just to economic renewal, but to social renewal as well. The political weather, I believe, has changed. Or to be more accurate, it has been changed. One of the major causes of this change, I believe, and the drivers of this, has been the CSJ. Who would have thought those years ago, when that little grotty room contained only 3 people in it, 4 when he was there in the case of Tim, could actually have been in that process. But I believe the CSJ, bit by bit, report by report, speech by speech, changed the narrative of conservative and subsequently, as a result of government, British politics. And I believe that is no mean feat. And let's just give us one example. There was one earlier on, but I just want to talk about this. In politics today, the Prime Minister, and indeed every government minister now, is publicly and privately committed to a life chances strategy. It is the strategy of the government for this Parliament. Who would have thought you would have heard a Conservative government commit itself to renewing and improving the life chances of those in the most difficult circumstances. And when I founded the CSJ, we were engaged in that battle of ideas. That was what it was all about. And, you know, there was this divide. Those on the left believed that compassion was best measured, as it seemed at the time, by the amount of money that the government could give to the poor. And, of course, money is vitally important. But I believe that true compassion goes wider. It's about providing greater opportunities. It's about improving education system, breaking the cycles of debt and addiction, and more than anything else, helping people get back into work. Work is at the heart of all of this, and I want to return to that. We argued at the time, and we continue to argue today, and I believe it is right, that work provides not just the economic value, but is critical to our health and helps build the character of individuals and families. We are now on the verge of creating that consensus with health professionals and doctors that work is part of health treatment, that it is part of a healthy life. And to many people, that previous welfare policy may have seemed compassionate, where you picked a target and you resolved it by, so it seemed, giving money. But what we saw over that 13 years was that it really trapped people then in a process of dependency, and ultimately that compounded people's poverty. So the social experiment where you have a marginal line and you simply need to cross it, and if somebody falls below it, then they get extra money. I believe that has in essence failed, and I believe for those who think carefully on all sides of the political argument, they will see that. Because by the end of the previous government, that is the previous Labour government, some 1.4 million people had spent 9 of the last 10 years on benefits. And therefore this compassion of expanding welfare to increase benefit payments had done nothing to move people really into that essential life-changing process of being able to change your lives by what you do through having a household, having work. The welfare system is often described, I think, very glibly as a safety net. And that's a pretty good analogy, but I think it's incomplete. It's incomplete because I like to think of it as something between a safety net and a trampoline. People should be caught when they fall on hard times, but it should also propel them back upwards, for that surely is the purpose. Just catching is not good enough. It is driving back upwards. And that is the point, that the dual purpose for which this should have been has actually ceased to be and had become very much a net, and thus, in due course, it had become an entrapment. Yes, it caught people that had fallen on bad times, but after catching them, it became too much of a hold. And the result then became, I think, a web of complex systems of benefits, a system that entrapped individuals, families, and whole communities, households even, and then created as a result of that a kind of growing underclass. The way the system took money away from people as they tried to do the right thing and move back into work meant that for too many, work simply never really paid. And the funny thing about that, and I think the funny thing is that people don't understand that. They can work this out. And there's been a sense abroad that somehow if you are in that group, if you are in that level, if you're in that area, that you will never make that calculation really in terms of what the incentives are as you would if you were in work. My answer has always been, very simply, why would you assume that somebody at the bottom of the social strata will not make decisions about their lives which are influenced by what they are likely to gain from any less than somebody else who is in some quite important job as they look to change jobs to get more money or a better career structure or more time at home. And so for many people, that complex web of benefits with different rules and different withdrawal rates meant that the safety option, the option that you would choose to do, and we would have made the same choice, would have been to do nothing. It was safer and easier not to take the risk, and risk is the issue that we need to deal with. So this meant that for many people, moving back into work was therefore not worth taking because it was a risk. Too much of a risk, you didn't gain anything. Most people thought you lost something, and you certainly lost the ability to just manipulate your life. So applying for a job, that was the critical bit. Attempting to step into that first rung of that ladder, contributing to the economy or earning a wage to provide for your family. All of this became a risk that was simply not worth taking. And what does that really tell us, if we think about it? What does that tell us about our priorities as a nation? Who do we value, and what values do we apply? What kind of message does that send about the value of work? The role of this government, therefore, has been not only clearly as a priority to fix the economy, but you cannot fix an economy unless we fix the society that is part of that economy at the same time. And when Philip and I made the move from the CSJ into government in 2010, for all the time I'd spent in politics, let me remind everybody, I had never set foot into government at all, ever. Actually, I turned down 2 jobs earlier on in my life because I knew it would be impossible. I would be out again because I was quite incapable of staying with the government line. So things moved on. But I must tell you, when I walked through the doors of this operation that I had avoided for all those years, it wasn't just frightening, but it was also immense, because our first priority had to be to really simply assess the scale of the problem. And what we found, I have to say, was staggering. And I'm really pleased, by the way, to have here tonight as well David Freud. He wasn't originally part of the CSJ, but he's been an incredible part of our team. And I want to personally thank you, David, for being here and helping us with all of the welfare reforms. And we found that 2.6 million people were on incapacity benefits, 900,000 of those for a decade or longer, nearly 700,000 lone parents on income support. 1.4 million people had been receiving out-of-work benefits for 9 of the previous 10 years, and almost 1 in 5 households, let me repeat that, 1 in 5 households had nobody at all in work. And the number of households where no one had ever worked had nearly doubled. Staggering. And yet the welfare bill had risen and risen and risen. So what do? We introduced policies like the benefit cap to ensure families on benefits had to face the same daily choice as everybody else. We might have thought that was harsh, but it was a way of saying to people, the decisions you take are choices, and you must take responsibility for those choices. Because if you cannot take responsibility for your choices, you will never navigate the world of work. The policy sent an important message. It said that the welfare system could not, at the end of the day, just be a bottomless system of demand for cash. But it said that the system, most importantly, we had to park alongside it, was there to help you in need, but not to tolerate an excess. But we also introduced then, alongside that, which is critical, the universal credit, which we are now rolling out. The biggest single reform to the welfare system, I believe, for a generation. Universal credit replaces 6 existing benefits with a single monthly payment, transferring directly into a claimant's bank account. Consider just that one point for a minute. Monthly payment as an example. Now, the vast majority of people in work are used to being paid monthly, and yet the benefit system we set up for when they fell out of work actually paid them fortnightly. So we wanted to change it. And we change it for 2 good reasons. Simply because if they are in work being paid monthly, and the vast majority then fall out of work, have to go back to a 2-weekly, fortnightly payment, then it makes life difficult for people, and you want them to move swiftly through and back into work. And most do, but they have to change all their requirements just before they go back into work and then change them again. That doesn't make any sense. So you're penalizing people who are already wanting to do the right thing. And the second aspect of this, and perhaps the most important bit, is for those who you now want to get into work. What you are asking at the moment they take, the biggest decision they make to move into work for the first time, is that you tell them, as they go into work, by the way, you better get used to a wholly different way of payment and sort your debts out at the same time. Nightmare. Absolutely impossible. So what we needed to do was to get people used to the idea of being like everybody else, so that moving from benefits to work was not such a big step over. Small point, but the massive amount of rows we've had about that, I must tell you, is the critical issue. So that was one of the kind of areas of trying to nudge and change them to say being in work and being out of work are 2 sides of the same coin. They are not different. And we also introduced the the claimant commitment at the same time, which I wanted to look like a contract of work. Why? When people came in, they said they sign on for their benefits. I said they sign on for their benefits, but I want them to do something different. I want them to sense that they are in work. I want them to sign a contract of work and know what they have to do. And when they did that in the job centres, people said that the advisors used to say to them, when you sign this piece of paper, you are not out of work. You are in work to find work. That is your job. We will work with you, and you will work with us, and we will get you into work. But that is your contract, and we will support you while you do that. And that has the downsides. If you don't do that, then we will withdraw that support from you. And these days, in a sense, we've become so familiar with universal credit as a concept, it's become, in a way, part of the modern discourse. But when it was first proposed back in 2009 at the CSJ, and we called it in a pamphlet Dynamic Benefits, and I see Stephen Bryant at the back there, Stephen, who is a critical part of that process of designing it, for which I absolutely thank you. But that report was influential in many ways, and it led to the groundwork for much of the reform that we've since undertaken in government. One of the most important contributions, I believe, that it has made, and this is coming out of the CSJ, is the shift of the focus of the debate onto the structures of the welfare system that need to change in the way that they support people, not the other way round. Why do we make people change to fit the system? Why not make the system change to fit people, and then people may well ultimately use the system in a positive way for their benefit? So it revealed essentially that we needed nothing short of a complete overhaul of the very infrastructure of the welfare system if we were to fix it. But it wasn't only in welfare alone, and I've skimmed over some of the changes. Remember, the CSJ is about people, so they're not hidebound on one area. The CSJ also looked at education. And in education and children's development too, the government, I think, a lot from the CSJ, but also through driven serious change within government, has undertaken major reforms to help the poorest and the most vulnerable. Youth unemployment has increased by 44% under the previous government. Our view was clear: that record was unacceptable. The rest of the world is producing brilliant scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. We can't keep up with them. Something had to change. And Michael Gove spotted that, and I hope and believe with the support of the CSJ and those papers that we produced, we have been more successful. As a nation, we know that it is not just about competing, it's about survival. Education, therefore, is vital as a vital component for social justice, because by the time a young person reaches the job center at the age of 18, frankly, it could be too late. Our education system must give disadvantaged and poor children what is known as, in physics, as an escape velocity. And that is the speed and trajectory needed to break free from the gravitational pull of the difficulties that keep pulling them down and holding them back. And interestingly enough, I'm announced out a trial the other day, something I know Philip and I were working on, which is we are now going to put job centres advisors, finally at last, in schools for children of the age of 14 to 16, so they can work with those who are likely to crash through the system at that stage. Work with them because they know the kind of work that's available in the local area. Talk to the kids about what they will be doing at the age of 16 or 17 if they leave school. What will life look like for them? What kind of job can they get? And what do they need to do in the remaining few years at school to ensure that they get a base-level job as they leave? To bring reality to their idea about what the future holds for kids for years that have thought education was nothing to do with jobs. Bring some reality about the fact that it is everything to do with jobs. This is a first break. This has never been done before. And this, again, has been driven by what had happened at the CSJ, changing it by bringing knowledge into schools in an area where they are least knowledgeable. So many government policies, past and present, can be transformed and tracked back from the CSJ. The most notable of these, I think, in recent months, has, of course, been what I referred to earlier as the Life Chances Agenda. This has its origins in the CSJ's groundbreaking 2007 report, Breakthrough Britain. And after that publication of the report, the CSJ then actually identified what we called the 5 pathways to poverty: family breakdown, educational failure, economic dependence and worklessness, addiction to drugs and alcohol, and severe personal debt. And fast forward nearly 10 years, and these have become the government's Life Chances strategy. This is at the core of now how we will look, measure, perceive and deal with poverty. It is something about which I am enormously pleased and proud of, in a sense, of my party for this, that the Prime Minister has now taken to his heart and spoken passionately about how the whole of this government is committed now to furthering. It's worth pausing here, in a sense, I think, to reflect on what a profound change this represents. As I mentioned at the start of the speech when we began, the CSJ, the Conservative movement, was not orientated at the time towards social justice. It wasn't that people didn't care in the Conservative Party, quite the contrary. I've never met more people that cared more about their country or their society. And it's not that they weren't interested. They were deeply interested. You only have to talk to individual MPs and the people that work on the ground. But rather that this area of policy had been completely dominated by other political parties, particularly on the left, and that their belief that you can fix deep-rooted social problems by just dealing in money. And that belief was tested, as I said earlier, and I believe has set us off in many cases on the wrong direction. And just a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister delivered, I think, possibly the most pro-social justice speech of any Prime Minister in my living memory, in which he announced an all-out assault on poverty. Today, every member of government is committed, therefore, to that Life Chances agenda, which incorporates those 5 measures. And it's important to note that it isn't simply a political victory. We don't make these points to be able to say, I told you so, this is not the nature. We fight for what we believe in because we are fighting for people who have been systematically let down by governments that have walked on by. It's easy to promise much, but it's more difficult to give in the right way of help. So promising much and giving little becomes the sense that people have in communities. And every statistic that we quote represents, I believe, real people, many of whom depend on the government to be a source of hope and, perhaps more importantly, help. One more example, perhaps, of how the CSJ has broken new ground and in doing so has made a huge impact on government policy is in its work on the issue of modern-day slavery. Now, this was mentioned earlier on, and it was quite remarkable, really, because I was in government at the time. I remember that initial speech, then the work that was done about it, then, of course, the CSJ carrying out the work and publishing the papers on it. In March 2013, it's worth reminding ourselves, the CSJ published that report entitled It Happens Here, which shone a light on the horrific reality of human trafficking and modern slavery in the United Kingdom. And at the time, there wasn't actually a massively strong political imperative to explore the issue. There was no significant public outcry. After all, this was about people, in a sense, that nobody really wanted to talk about, the darker areas of lots of people's lives. And yet the CSJ took it upon itself to make this issue a priority. It gathered the evidence, as we started out originally. It collected case studies. It spoke to experts. It re-interviewed victims again and again, and it then started the process of lobbying us in government. But simply, I think the CSJ did what it did best. The CSJ uncovered an injustice, shone a light on it, and then decided there was a way that they could do something about it. And as a direct result of that report, the government passed the Modern Slavery Act in 2015. The Home Secretary personally adopted it, was persuaded about it, and made it her personal cause. And I think it is one of the first pieces, as I understand it, I think it is the first piece of legislation in the world to address slavery and trafficking in the 21st century. It's a huge thing for a government to do it, but the government wouldn't have done it if the CSJ had not got on its bike and made certain that the government had all the evidence and all the reason to do it. And during the passage of that bill through Parliament, the Home Secretary herself, actually, called, as I understand it, the CSJ the catalyst to the new law. That's a huge fillip to an organisation that started in a small office with 4 people and not a lot of good paint on the wall. So, what next? I'm pleased to say the simple answer is more of the same, more of the same. After 5 years away from the CSJ, I have given I like to say I've given Philippa, not at all. She's left me behind. So I watch as Philippa, Baroness Stroud now, no less, is back at the helm. Anyone who knows Philippa as well as most of us do in this room know that she's not going to rest on her laurels. She's left us back at the department to get on with the job of work, and now she's already lined up several important new areas of policy that the CSJ will soon start work on. These include homelessness, productivity, and the disability employment gap. I'm particularly keen on the latter. And I want to say, I'm going to leave it to Philippa to say a little bit more, and she will speak in a bit more detail about those. I do, however, want to say that when it comes to one of the challenges we face, getting more people with disabilities into work is one of the key challenges of my department. It's the area that we as a society need to recognize we need to do more about, and I look forward to anything that the CSJ has to do this, as it is now a pledge for us to halve that gap in government. And it's been said, in many senses, is that you need to find a way, a framework, I think, for shaping and measuring the extent of our social problems in the past. And I think that when people say if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, it's true in a sense. For too long that's been the case with poverty. And due to a lack of adequate measurement, it's been possible to ignore, I think, the true level of poverty quite easily. And not just measured by calculation of relative income, where you are often considered to be in poverty if your income fell, as I talked earlier on about this nominal 60% of medium income line, but rather in assessing the barriers that people face to improving their own situation, whether that be problems of debt, relationship breakdown, poor education, addiction, or something else. And those Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz has said, and I want to quote this because it's very important. He said, "What you measure affects what you do. If you have the wrong metric, you strive for the wrong things." That is absolutely true, and we saw it. If we measured just an income level, then we piled all of our effect of our policy around the income measure. But we forgot there were lots of people that we left behind in the process, and that was what became apparent in the UK. As Abraham Maslow once said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. Don't smile, Betsy. My own DIY doesn't really look that good at home. But the reality, that is true. If you only take one way of doing something, then all you ever do is you try and adjust the human being to what you have rather than the other way around. And we need to better measure poverty and social injustice if we're to bring and have any hope of finding a solution, and the right ones at that. So I believe that we're trying hard to make sure the government does its part through the Welfare Reform and Work Bill and other elements which is going through Parliament. In particular, the bill at the moment now, and I was just actually voting on this a few minutes ago, the bill introduces a new duty of government to report on worklessness and educational attainment, two key areas in the Life Chances strategy. The worklessness measure will identify the proportion of children living in workless households and the proportion of children in long-term workless households. And the educational attainment measure will focus on GCSE attainment for all pupils and for disadvantaged pupils. And alongside this, as importantly, I want to stress, alongside this will be a range of non-statutory indicators to measure our progress against the other root causes of poverty. By measuring these things, it is my hope, no, it is my belief that future governments can never again ignore or misrepresent the true nature of poverty in Britain. And, in a sense, to paraphrase Joseph Stiglitz, we are creating the right metrics so that we will strive only for the right things. And I want to say something very quickly about that. It's really, really important for us to understand not where people are, but more importantly, why they got there. Because if you don't understand why people get there, then you have no idea about who they are. And then you need to understand what their trajectory is. I know I use it as a strange phrase, but if you don't think that you know that if somebody falls into poverty, they may have all the right skills, they may just have had a real problem of a divorce or a hiatus in their family that has caused a temporary period when they are down on their luck. But if they have those right qualities innate in them, then you can work with them, and what you do with them to get them on that trajectory back out is very different from the family that has broken down completely and has none of those attributes and those abilities because they never were lucky enough to be in the position to be able to gain any of those. The work you do with them is fundamentally different than the work you do with someone who has just fallen on hard times for a period. The problem with the existing measures that we have is they treat everybody the same, and that is where the problem arises. So your money ends up going on those that are easier to turn around, and you leave the other ones behind because they are too difficult and they will not cross the line. These measures will drive us and demand that we face up to the fact that our purpose in life is to deal with those who have the deepest problems, not just those who we can turn around easily and measure against a tick box that told us that we succeeded on an arbitrary system. So in conclusion, really, looking back over the last 11 years, the CSJ has achieved much, and I think clearly should be rightly proud of all it's done. I am obviously very proud of this, but there is still a lot more to do. The social challenges facing Britain remain serious. Serious problems require, of course, serious solutions. And as a politician and as a member of this government, I'm deeply thankful for organisations like the Centre for Social Justice, who provide guidance, input and expertise on tough areas of policy. Organisations like the CSJ keep governments honest. They hold us to account. They call us out when we go wrong, which is important. And they improve the quality of debate, I believe, in the wider side of the country. And I know there are in tonight many supporters of the CSJ in the room. And I also personally want to thank all of you for what you've done to help facilitate the work that the CSJ has carried out in the last 11 years. Frankly, the CSJ could not have done this without you. Remember, the CSJ is not funded by government. It does not go elsewhere. It finds its funds and its support from people like you, many of you in the room, and many who are not able to be here tonight. So they could not have done any of this. They could not have changed government. They could not have saved lives by changing government to in turn apply those policies into real action, had you not first of all decided that you were pledged to this concept of delivering social justice in a government run by the Conservatives. So, please don't leave tonight without talking to someone who is connected to the CSJ. It's with immense pride that I look at the work of the CSJ and I see everything it has done, it continues to do, and I hope many of you will continue to support it. It's, I think, succeeding in its mission to put social justice at the heart of our nation. And those 11 years have just been a start, really, for what I think has both been astonishing and will be astonishing. But I know with Philippa at the helm, I have my deep suspicions that the next 11 years will be even better, particularly because she doesn't have me sitting there actually involved with her like she did last time, so she can really do the things that she wants to do. So my thanks to all of you. My thanks for being here tonight. My thanks for supporting. My thanks for all of those who have been part of this process, some of whom I've managed to name this evening. And I ask you to simply to bear this simple concept in mind, that if you would change the world, you must change a life. And that is what the Centre for Social Justice is about. It's about changing the world one life at a time. Thank you very much indeed.
Ian, thank you so much for articulating the journey from battle for ideas to battle for lives. We are so grateful for everything that you've done. I am only going to say a few words now because there are drinks and canapes kindly provided by Bloomberg out there. So just 2 more minutes and then we will hand over to the drinks and the canapes. But as we've heard tonight, the founding of the Centre for Social Justice was designed to bring to Westminster the best poverty-fighting solutions. We are utterly convinced by the potential of each human being and want to ensure that they have the opportunity to fulfill that potential. Before I came into politics, I sat with too many very, very broken people, but who were incredibly courageous and who, against all the odds, fought their way back from the most awful of life's circumstances. And therefore, we at the Centre for Social Justice do not want to settle for anything but the very best for them. But whilst those on the front line support life change one life at a time, I can remember only too well, after 17 years of founding and building voluntary sector organisations, I lifted my head and looked just a few hundred yards down the road to find a whole load more people that it would take another 17 years to support, and then another road, a whole load more. And something in me said, something has got to change systemically here, and not just one life at a time. So the Centre for Social Justice has been set up to change the nation systemically, so that in partnership with those on the front line, we can see genuine life change. Over the next few weeks, we're launching a new work plan. We're going to be pushing at the doors that the government has left, even if they've only left them slightly ajar for us, we are pushing at those doors. The PM has committed, as Ian said, to an all-out assault on poverty, and we are going to give him everything that he needs for that all-out assault. The Chancellor wants to increase productivity, so we're going to give him a thorough skills agenda so that as productivity increases, the bottom 20% are not left behind. Ian wants to halve the disability employment gap, and we want to ensure that employers and those with disabilities both have what they need to take away the fear of transitioning disabled people into the workplace safely. These and many areas are where we will be investing our time and energy as a think tank in the coming months. So we would like to invite each and every one of you to join us on that journey. Some of you, as I've said before, have already been journeying with us for a while. We are really, really grateful. But some of you, this is a first-time look in for you, and you're kind of summing us up and thinking, is this a place I can connect with? I personally happen to think it is, but that's your choice. We would love it if that you would connect with us and work with us. And there are huge numbers of opportunities. Intellectually, many of you have huge problem-solving skills and insights into policy making that our researchers could benefit from. We would love your experience. Experientially, it never ceases to amaze me how in a room like this, people's own life histories can inform us and tell us so much. We would benefit from you joining us. There are MPs and peers here who will want to work with us in the House, in both chambers. We would love to work in partnership with you. There are journalists here who will want to tell remarkable stories of heroic life change. We would love to work with you. And financially, there are some of you here who want to support us financially, and we would love to work with you. So we welcome all forms of working together. It's a bit like a family. So may I just take this moment just to say thank you to this amazing couple, Ian and Betsy, who have been through so much in this journey and who have just been incredible to work with over the last few years, for your commitment and all your work, and then also to Bloomberg for your incredibly generous hospitality, and to say relax and enjoy yourself and have great conversations with us about all you want to contribute with the canapés and the wine. Thank you.
I forgot to thank one person, and I wonder if you could just forgive me for a second. There's one person I forgot to thank who's in this room tonight, and I was teasing him a bit earlier on. But after Philippa and I went into government, Christian Guy took over the CSJ and ran it. And I want to thank you, Christian, for all your hard work. And now you've gone to Downing Street. They at last are on the right track. Thank you very much indeed.